18 days. That's all it took for the most powerful nation on Earth to admit defeat in a technology war it started. No apology, no explanation, just silence. This is the story of how Chinese drones became so essential that even America couldn't ban them. When Western policymakers see a drone stamped with "Made in China," alarm bells ring. Security meetings are called. Legislation is drafted. The narrative is always the same. National security threat, data vulnerability, foreign surveillance. On December 22nd of last year, the United States Federal Communications Commission unveiled what appeared to be a decisive move. A sweeping import restriction aimed squarely at Chinese drone manufacturers. The announcement sent ripples through the global tech industry. Trade analysts called it the next front in the escalating technology Cold War between Washington and Beijing. Defense consultants nodded approvingly. This was textbook strategic competition, they said. Cut off the rival's access to your market, force domestic innovation, rebuild supply chain independence. But then something unexpected happened. Exactly 18 days later, the entire proposal vanished. No press conference, no official statement, no acknowledgement from any federal agency. The policy simply disappeared from the regulatory pipeline as quietly as morning fog burning off a runway. Industry insiders who had been bracing for upheaval were left stunned. Some whispered that this wasn't just a policy reversal. This was an admission that the United States had lost leverage in a market it once assumed it could control. So what really happened? How did a technology ban designed to protect American interests collapse before it even took effect? And more importantly, how did Chinese drones become so dominant that not even the world's largest economy could function without them? From hobby gadgets to global infrastructure, for many people, drones still conjure images of weekend hobbyists in parks, flying camera-equipped toys over lakes and hiking trails. But that perception is, honestly, dangerously outdated. The drone industry has evolved far beyond recreational use. Today, these machines are embedded in the operational fabric of modern society. Drive through agricultural regions across Asia, Europe, or the Americas, and you'll see them hovering low over cornfields and vineyards. Equipped with precision spraying systems, they apply fertilizers and pesticides with pinpoint accuracy, reducing waste and environmental impact. In logistics hubs on the outskirts of major cities, autonomous drones follow GPS-mapped routes, delivering medical supplies to remote clinics and e-commerce packages to suburban doorsteps. Across sprawling industrial complexes, they inspect high-voltage power lines, oil refineries, and telecommunications towers, jobs that once required scaffolding, helicopters, or dangerously exposed human workers. The numbers tell the story. By 2024, the global drone market had swelled past $70 billion. More than 8 million drones were officially registered worldwide, and that figure doesn't account for the millions operating in informal or unregulated airspace. Like smartphones a decade earlier, drones have ceased being novelties. They're now tools, as commonplace in certain industries as laptops or forklifts. But the country that transformed drones from experimental devices into mass-market essentials wasn't in Silicon Valley. It wasn't in Europe's tech corridors. It was China. The night skies over Chongqing. In June 2025, tens of thousands gathered along the riverbanks of Chongqing, one of China's sprawling megacities. As darkness settled, the crowd turned their eyes upward. What happened next wasn't fireworks. It was orchestration on a scale most had never witnessed. Wave after wave of drones lifted into the air, their LED arrays synchronized to the millisecond. They didn't just form shapes, they told a story. First came delicate floral patterns, blooming and dissolving in midair. Then came recognizable landmarks, the city's iconic bridges, its mountainous skyline, even animated depictions of bustling street markets. The drones moved in flawless coordination, each one a pixel in a dynamic, three-dimensional canvas stretching across the heavens. This wasn't just a spectacle, it was a Guinness World Record. and it was executed by a Chinese drone manufacturer called Damada, a company most Westerners had never heard of. But those who follow the industry weren't surprised. Rewind to February 2022, during the opening ceremony of the Beijing Winter Olympics. As billions watched worldwide, over 2,000 drones arranged themselves into the shapes of Bing Duen Duen and Shui Ron Ron, the event's mascots. The display required flawless system stability, zero communication lag, and millimeter-level spatial precision. One software glitch, one GPS error, and the entire formation would collapse into chaos. It didn't. Every drone hit its mark. These demonstrations weren't just about showmanship. They were proof of concept. They showcased China's mastery over swarm technology, real-time coordination algorithms, and large-scale deployment logistics. And the world took notice. From spectacle to market domination. By 2024, Chinese drone manufacturers weren't just winning awards, they were winning contracts. In the first 10 months of that year alone, China exported over 3 million civilian drones. The total value approached $2 billion. Market share? Over 70% globally. The buyers weren't just developing nations looking for affordable tech. They were advanced economies, the Netherlands, Germany, Brazil, and yes, the United States. That last one might seem contradictory, given Washington's rhetoric about Chinese technology risks. But you know, the data doesn't lie. In 2023, the American consumer drone market was valued at nearly $1.5 billion. Of that total, 75% belonged to DJI, the Shenzhen-based giant that's become synonymous with civilian drones. And it wasn't just hobbyists and filmmakers buying DJI products. Between 2017 and 2020, the United States Department of the Interior purchased approximately 810 Chinese-made drones, spending close to $7 million. These weren't toys. They were deployed across the U.S. Geological Survey, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and other federal agencies. Their missions included environmental monitoring, wildfire assessment, infrastructure inspection, and disaster response. At first, these drones were seen as convenient tools, affordable, reliable, easy to operate. But over time, something more significant happened. They became essential. Emergency response teams built protocols around them. Infrastructure managers scheduled inspections based on drone availability. Data collection workflows assumed their presence. And that's when the alarm bells started ringing in Washington. The security narrative takes shape. By the middle of the last decade, American policymakers began asking uncomfortable questions. What happens when critical infrastructure depends on foreign-made devices? What if those devices collect data and transmit it back to servers beyond U.S. jurisdiction? What if a geopolitical crisis turns those drones into potential vulnerabilities? The concerns weren't entirely baseless. Modern drones are sophisticated machines. They capture high-resolution imagery. They record GPS coordinates. They transmit data in real time. In the wrong hands or under the wrong legal framework, that information could theoretically be exploited. So, in December 2025, the FCC made its move. The new regulatory framework was straightforward. Any drone or drone component manufactured outside the United States would be subject to heightened scrutiny. Products from certain Chinese manufacturers, including DJI and Autel Robotics, would be placed on a restricted equipment list. Without FCC certification, they couldn't be sold legally in the American market. The official justification centered on national security. The FCC chairman framed it as a necessary step to protect critical infrastructure, secure borders, and prevent cyber vulnerabilities. The policy included some exceptions. Previously certified products could still be sold. Devices already in use wouldn't be confiscated. Certain models on an approved blue list could still enter the market if they met stringent security standards. On paper, it looked like a measured response. A way to balance security concerns with market realities. But behind closed doors, the cracks were already forming. 18 days later, The quiet retreat. No fanfare, no official retraction, no statement from the White House or the FCC, just silence. 18 days after the ban was announced, it was gone, pulled from the regulatory docket as if it had never existed. Trade publications scrambled for explanations. Industry lobbyists claimed credit. But the truth was simpler and more uncomfortable. The United States couldn't afford to lose Chinese drones. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Why the ban was doomed from the start. Let's talk about the ground reality. Across thousands of police departments, fire stations, search and rescue units, and municipal agencies, Chinese drones had become standard equipment. They weren't luxury items. They were operational necessities. When the sanctions were floated, agencies began exploring alternatives. What they found was sobering. American-made drones existed, but they were scarce, expensive, and often underperforming. Flight times were shorter. Failure rates were higher. Some models couldn't handle the environmental stress of real-world missions, extended operations in heat, cold, dust, or wind. Procurement costs weren't just higher. They were several times higher, sometimes 5 or 6 times the price of a comparable Chinese model. Worse, switching suppliers meant retraining personnel, rewriting operational protocols, and integrating new software platforms. For resource-strapped local governments, that was a logistical nightmare. The impact wasn't hypothetical. In disaster zones, the absence of reliable drones meant slower response times. During wildfire season, aerial reconnaissance gaps delayed evacuations. In post-storm assessments, teams reverted to manual ground patrols, losing the speed and comprehensive perspective that drones provided. And then there was the supply chain problem. Even if American companies wanted to ramp up production, they couldn't. Critical components, flight control modules, image transmission systems, high-capacity batteries were sourced from Chinese manufacturers. The entire ecosystem was interconnected. Banning Chinese drones didn't just hurt Chinese companies. It crippled American ones too. Faced with these realities, the White House had no viable path forward. The ban was quietly shelved. A pattern of failed restrictions. This wasn't the first time. In 2020, the Department of the Interior grounded most of its drone fleet, citing security concerns. More than half of those aircraft were Chinese-made, predominantly from DJI. The grounding was supposed to signal resolve, a willingness to prioritize security over convenience. But within months, reality intervened. Critical missions, infrastructure inspections, wildfire monitoring, flood assessments couldn't be completed with available alternatives. Some drones were quietly brought back into service under temporary security waivers. The message was clear. Ideology is one thing, but operational necessity is another. From 2021 to 2022, the pressure intensified. Multiple Chinese drone manufacturers were added to entity lists, blocking American investment and restricting access to advanced semiconductors. The National Defense Authorization Act explicitly prohibited federal agencies from purchasing certain Chinese civilian drones. Yet none of these measures created a comprehensive blockade. State governments, private companies, nonprofits, and individual consumers continued buying Chinese drones. The federal government could limit its own purchases, but it couldn't control the broader market. And the broader market had already decided. Why China's drone industry is unshakable. China's dominance in the civilian drone sector isn't accidental. It's the result of deliberate industrial strategy, coordinated investment, and relentless execution. Unlike most countries, China has achieved something rare: full supply chain integration. Almost every component needed to build a consumer or commercial drone, motors, batteries, flight controllers, camera gimbals, communication modules, can be sourced domestically. Often, they're produced within the same province, sometimes within the same city. This vertical integration creates several advantages. It reduces costs. It accelerates production timelines. It minimizes dependency on foreign suppliers. And it enables rapid iteration. When a design needs tweaking, engineers can walk down the hall to the factory floor. When a component needs upgrading, the supplier is a phone call away, not an ocean apart. The result? Chinese drones offer performance comparable to Western alternatives at a fraction of the price. In many cases, a DJI drone costs half as much as a similar American or European model, sometimes less. For businesses, municipalities, and individual buyers, the choice is obvious. Why pay double for similar performance, especially when the Chinese product often comes with better customer support, more robust software ecosystems, and faster replacement part availability? The market speaks louder than policy. Economics, at its core, is about choices. And when given the choice, global markets have consistently chosen Chinese drones. Not because of political alignment, not because of marketing campaigns, but because they work. They're affordable, and they're available. American sanctions can limit government procurement. They can restrict certain technologies, but they can't change fundamental market dynamics. As long as Chinese drones remain the most practical, stable, and cost-effective option, demand will persist. And that's the lesson Washington keeps learning the hard way. You can legislate against a technology, but if you don't have a better alternative, the legislation becomes theater. What this means for the future. The quiet withdrawal of the FCC's drone ban isn't just a policy footnote. It's a signal. It reveals the limits of technological decoupling in an interconnected world. It shows that even superpowers can't unilaterally reshape markets they no longer control. China's civilian drone industry has built advantages that are structural, not superficial. Replicating that ecosystem would require years of investment, coordinated industrial policy, and the kind of supply chain integration that most Western economies abandoned decades ago in favor of globalized outsourcing. Could the United States eventually build a competitive domestic drone industry? Perhaps, but not quickly, and not cheaply, and probably not without accepting higher costs and reduced performance in the interim. For now, Chinese drones aren't just competing in the global market, they're defining it. From light shows in the Middle East to disaster response in North America, from agricultural monitoring in Europe to infrastructure inspection in South Asia, these machines have become indispensable. So here's the question the FCC didn't want to answer, and the one the White House couldn't. What happens when the technology you need is made by the rival you're trying to contain? For 18 days, the United States tried to draw a line in the sky, and then reality forced them to erase it. Because markets don't care about politics. They care about what works. And right now, what works is made in China. If you found this story revealing, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're digging into the technology battles reshaping the world, one quiet surrender at a time. The next episode might surprise you even more.